So the track damaged the tyres. It was far too hot to compete. Oscar Piastri won a sprint race. And a world champion was crowned, apparently. Who knows? Welcome back to Motorsport 101. It's never a good sign when a guy winning the world championship is at the bottom of our set list. But hey, I guess that's Formula One for you sometimes. Welcome to episode 477 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Trey Harrison. And in this edition, we'll be talking about the Qatar Grand Prix. Never have we had so much to talk about for a Grand Prix that was at best decent. It's weird how this sport works out sometimes, but like the story was everything that wasn't the race itself directly. Weird how these things turn out, but a lot to get through in Qatar. Just the two of us on this week's edition, or this week's recordings, I should say, because we've got a MotoGP one to get through. Apparently some news dropped last week that was fairly important. But RJ is...
More on that later.
Yeah, RJ's out on the road. I think he's at Petit Le Mans this weekend, the lucky bastard. Have a good one, RJ. I know you'll be listening. But have a good one, buddy.
Yeah, sleeping under the watchful eye of the Michelin man on the side of the media center.
It's like, imagine watching him in one corner, Ryan Eric King, who's also down there, but also on the other side, the Michelin man. I'm not sure which one's scarier.
Well, depends if Mike Hawthorne becomes a topic.
Yes, as you can probably guess by now, Cam Buckley is in the other chair next to me right now. And did you listen to our IndyCar season review, Cam?
I didn't have a chance to on account of the fact that I had COVID and wasn't able to be on it, and I'm pissed.
Yeah, that was brutally unlucky for two reasons. One, because of obviously COVID is a bastard, of course, and that's horrible.
I still have the cough, so if you hear me spluttering a little bit, you know why.
Been there, done that, got the T-shirt, no kidding. But the second part was that King called himself Zach Wilson because of standing in at the last minute to do that show. And I love the fact that he accidentally compared you to Aaron Rodgers, which I thought was a horrible insult.
Oh, he's gonna fuck himself.
I felt like it was only fair to give you the right of reply on that one.
that is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard.
Yes, and I will happily say Aaron Rodgers can go fuck himself for trying to have a debate with Travis Kelce, who, God heaven forbid, promotes the idea of getting vaccinated.
Mr. Pfizer now, which in his own words, he wears that name with pride.
Love that for him. I like Travis Kelce living life at the moment for what it's worth. Hey, I'm on a very good football team. I've won 2 Super Bowls. I'm a positive role model for taking vaccines, and you're dating the most famous person on the planet. The other one is Aaron Rodgers, who has one good knee and is currently out of a job. He's unemployed.
Yeah,
and,
his Achilles is currently made of toothpicks and chewing gum.
Yeah, and fuck Pat McAfee for continuing to platform this goon on his show, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I don't know why people like Pat McAfee so much, but if you're continuing to put a anti-vaxxer on your platform every other week because he's Aaron Rodgers, you're just as bad as him, quite frankly. I don't need Joe Rogan podcast tactics of go on and debate me. That's how problems start, and I don't like it. Anyway, we'll talk about the Qatar Grand Prix in this podcast over the next hour or so. And, well, everything that wasn't the Qatar Grand Prix, really, because we had an unmitigated disaster on Saturday morning roll up when Pirelli sliced the tyres open. More on that in a bit. It had a dramatic effect on the entire weekend. And there was one problem that wasn't actually too much of a problem in the end, and one that definitely was, and that was, oh yeah, did we mention it's 33 degrees during the race? Like, that generally might be a problem. Bit dangerous on that end. And oh yeah, the race itself actually happened. We had teammates take each other out. We had Oscar Piastri in the sprint race because, hey, McLaren's won something this year. That's a plus. And the small deal of Max Verstappen becoming the first man in 40 years to win a world title on a Saturday, as you do. The last person to do that, Cam? Do you know, by any chance?
I'm sure pre-COVID me would, but post-COVID me has hella brain fog. So,
his future father-in-law. Kyalami 83.
Moving on.
Moving on intensive. Places you can find this real
things I wanted to come back from 2005 this year. Resident Evil 4. Things I didn't want to return from 2005. The 2005 United States Grand Prix.
Generally, this is a good idea. Basically, you can find us real quick. We are on twitter.com/motorsport_101. Our personal handles are at Dre_WTF1, at CBuckley917. If you want to follow RJ, you can at RJ O'Connell. Sadly, not with us on this week's recordings. I'll be back next week.
He's having far too much fun.
Yes.
At one of my favorite racetracks in the world, where please God, bring this one home. Penske, please God.
well, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit next week when he's back on the show, because we'll have MotoGP in Indonesia to talk about next week as well. Again, if you want to back us financially, you can on patreon.com/motorsport101. If you want to help us and back us financially on there, that would be very cool indeed. And of course, all of those details and our social media and all that good stuff is on our website, motorsport101.com, including some bonus thoughts on this very race in Qatar, written by yours truly. And also, if you missed it, check out last week's edition as well. The I called it Pullover, the 2023 IndyCar season review. 130.
That was my line. I was silenced by nature.
It's a 130-minute special on the 2023 IndyCar season. It was a very, very good show, and I'm very happy with. So do check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into all the chaos that was the 2023 Qatar Grand Prix right after this.
Well, this Grand Prix was eventful, huh? On Saturday morning, Pirelli revealed that the new Pyramid Kerb's protruding, ribbed 50-millimeter high curb...
For your pleasure.
...was... I swear to God, Harrison.
You said ribbed. It wasn't in the script.
That's what it is.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Well, the tires weren't feeling the pleasure because it was causing them to oscillate and fall apart at their sidewalls. As a result, the track limits of turns 12 and 13 were extended inwards by about 80 centimeters, and due to a sprint race that was all kinds of fucky with numerous safety cars, it was inconclusive, and the FIA mandated an effective 3-stop race via a go over this and you're black flagged 18-lap tire life limit. Now, not 18-lap stints, but rather 18 laps on the tires themselves, regardless of whether they were used previously or not. It turned the race into a 57-lap sprint, with Oscar Piastri in second claiming he had done effectively 57 qualifying laps. How do we feel about the changes on this one, Dre?
Well, not a good sign that Tom Bassis, who is the FIA single-seater president at this point at the FIA, had to explain himself on Sky Sports, saying that, turns out these pyramid curbs might not be the solution after all. Which
really?
Yeah, I for those who know your bikes, which we both do on this show, they'd already installed them in Jerez, and the moment I saw them, I was like, "This is not a good idea." I was like, "How is this going to fix anything?" And yeah, it was. They've put them in there and at Misano currently at the moment, and they know that's more effective for the MotoGP calendar than it is for F1, obviously. But as soon as I saw
the point again, we have to raise the point. Because all throughout the weekend, there was just put a wall there discourse. Well, this is a MotoGP track first and an F1 track second.
Right.
If you put a wall there, you're going to kill some motorcycle riders. That's
Absolutely.
not an option.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, people, again, for whatever reason, sometimes people only watch F1, and look, that's fine, but educate yourself if you're going to make those sorts of comments, because it's not as simple as just saying put a wall there or put gravel there or whatever the fuck you want to say. It's not as simple as that. This was already a treacherous sort of Grand Prix, a very abrasive surface, not a lot of grip. New surface. It was a track had been resurfaced as well. A lot of sand blowing around, 20-mile-an-hour crosswinds across the track, all sorts of fucky. Basically, it was not an ideal conditions race. Now, I have to say this, props to Pirelli. They found the problem early. Then that is as much as you can reasonably ask for.
And in a weekend where, of course, with the sprint weekend, you have to remember, we only get the practice session.
Yeah,
so we only really had one practice session to get this right and get the data necessary to figure out that they had a problem, and then try and correct for it.
Yeah, and the FIA did, as far as I'm concerned, overall a good job. Like, because this was not a problem during the race. Failures. Yeah, we had no tyre failures and everything ended up fine. And well done to Pirelli for finding the error quickly, and the FIA quickly coming in to mandate changes. I mean, it may have been a bit more conclusive if we knew what would happen off the sprint, as they were going to use the sprint tyres as a reference point towards this. But unfortunately, because that sprint race had 3 safety cars in it, we didn't get anywhere near 19 laps of green flag running. So the data from that sprint was inconclusive. So they had to take the worst case scenario, which was go off the practice tyres. And as a result, they were like, well, we can't guarantee the safety of the tyre beyond 20 laps. So they put an 18 lap hard limit in there. And again, this was a safety change. It was a mandated change. I'm not going to complain about it because it was done for the greater good.
I would say props to everyone in this case. Thankfully, in this instance of the tires are oscillating themselves apart, we're not in a tire war era.
No.
So there was no vested interest in certain teams deciding to dig their heels in, and everyone came together to ensure we got a race.
Right.
And I don't think that the FIA and Pirelli could have really done much else with the data they had, with the tires they had, because with the fact that this is a control tire, a set of control tires in this case, the Pirelli production pipeline does not really, it can't facilitate them overnighting new tires.
No, you would never plan for that to happen.
Go with what you have.
Yeah, you would never plan for that to happen. Even more so in a shootout, in a sprint weekend where everybody's got less sets anyway, because it's only 11 for the whole weekend rather than 13.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just a series of unfortunate events. But the sport, the governing body, and Pirelli as a tyre supplier came together and they mitigated the problem as best they could. Now, was it perfect? No. I think the drivers deserved more than a 10-minute practice session to get used to the new layout of how 12 and 13 got down. I know it's very easy for us to criticize the drivers and say, oh, just stay to the lines, but you fundamentally changed the corner. That's going to take some getting used to, and I don't think it's any coincidence that 31 laps got thrown out during the shootout.
Right.
You know, and I think they deserved more than a 10-minute practice session to get used to that new corners. I think the drivers were kind of set up to fail a little bit on that one. And, you know, you're going from a 10-minute rehabilitation session into a qualifying session where drivers are going to take as much liberty as they can. I mean, that was always going to be a recipe for disaster, and it played all kinds of havoc in that shootout session. So, yeah, it was messy in that sense. And look, I'm not going to pretend like it. A lot of people, like, I literally, fun fact, friend of the show, John T's Corner, put in a take that ended up on Hot Takes Wednesday, my other show, literally saying, hey, the drivers should push more and we should have more races like this. And to which my response was, were we watching the same race? Because I don't think the drivers pushing any harder made it any more entertaining than a normal race does.
No, because at the end of the day, with the nature of modern Formula One cars, with the nature of the track designs, you need offsets in order to, and what we saw on Sunday's race was, and we'll get to the reasons why, most of the passing came from extreme tire offsets, because if you were on the soft tire, they just died immediately.
Yeah, they were good for about 5 laps.
If you were on the hard tire, you were slow as hell.
Yep, too long to get heat into the tire.
If you were on the mediums, you were pushing them the whole stint, and then there was a big deficit between fresh tires and old tires. And George Russell was coming through the field because of reasons redacted for now.
Exactly. So,
you need those. If you have similar cars in similar positions and everyone's pushing 100%, I guess it looks more interesting to the camera. That's about it.
Yeah, like it's I've said many a time about this. The whole idea about pushing 100% of the time makes for a more entertaining sport is a myth. It's a placebo that fans will often cite to make themselves feel better about what they're watching. I don't think it necessarily makes a race more entertaining, and I think this is the walk-in example of that. I don't think this race for me, if assuming we didn't have this Pirelli tyre problem, which again not necessarily Pirelli's fault, we would have likely seen one-stoppers dominate the proceedings of this race, because there was no tyre degradation in this race. It was a glorified sprint in all but name, and I think it would have made for a more interesting race, seeing guys battle between 1 and 2 stops. And we didn't get that. And we also knew roughly when everybody was going to pit, so we didn't get a lot of undercar.
We got the chart before the race.
Yeah, we had the chart, and Pirelli again doing the right thing, giving the audience as much information as possible, which is what I've got no problem. I'm all for that, of course. And the sport itself had the sheet, and they actually put graphics on the screen to help the audience say when they had to pit. That's a good thing. I got no problem with that. Giving the audience information is a good thing.
Informing your audience.
Yeah, like that's a good thing. It's just a shame that as a result, it killed a lot of the intrigue because you knew when everybody was coming in. So, look, and again, this is not a criticism of the sport. This is what they had to do with the safety mandate in place. They had to make the best of a bad situation, and I think they did a decent job, all things considered. It's just unfortunate that, look, anyone that talked about having mandated stops in races needs to stop. It's not going to make the sport any better. You need, in my opinion, you need tyres that can degrade enough to make 2 versus 1 stop viable, in my opinion. I think that's the sweet spot as far as I'm concerned. Not this whole idea about, we need 3 stops in a race or we need to use all 3 compounds. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is most of the time Pirelli plays it safe and we have a hard tyre that can do more than half distance. So why wouldn't you want to 1-stop it?
No, because what we've got now is actually something that's worse, because now the hard tyre is unviable. It has been all season because it doesn't work. You can't switch it on. You have the medium that's too good at everything because it has more grip than the soft will after 5 or 6 laps. But it also, you can switch it on, unlike the hards. So most weekends we have 1 viable race tire right now.
Yeah,
there's been a consistent theme across this season.
No, you make a very good point there. The medium tire has been the race tire for, a good chunk of this season, and we have to run a soft or a hard alongside that in the most generic 1-stopper of races most of the time, because 1 race tire is often good enough to do more than half race distance. And once you do that, if you've got a tire that can do that viably, it's going to be a 1-stopper every time. And that isn't entertaining, unfortunately. That's not going to produce intriguing strategic races. And then that's unfortunate. And this was an extreme example of that. But this was the other end of the scale. This was designated pit windows for 3 stoppers that wasn't interesting. It was just guys coming in and going as fast as they can. And that's probably why McLaren ended up so close to Red Bull by the end of the race.
It blunted the ultimate weapon in the RB19's vast array, which is the fact that it is just the best car on its tires in all conditions. Yeah. Now, it didn't end up mattering because they had so much pace in hand at the end of stints anyways that Max could basically open the taps after saving the tires, set a fastest lap, get undercut by a couple seconds, and still have enough margin to get out anyway.
Yeah, and he was just better. They were still just slightly better on their tyres than McLaren were anyway. So, Piastri would stay with Max for a few laps, and then towards the end of the stints, McLaren would fade again. And Piastri was excellent in the back end of the race, but I think that was partly because Norris was pushing him. More on that in a little bit towards the end of the show. But I for all those people that are saying we need races like this where people are pushing 100% or we need mandated stops, no. That's not going to solve this problem.
I think it was the worst. You ended up seeing the worst of both worlds.
Exactly, and I don't think that made for a more entertaining race. But I don't care about the entertainment side of this race because they had to do this just to save the tyres and for safety reasons. So you got to do what you got to do. Unfortunately, in some cases, I
suppose that's a good segue because one safety issue ended up thankfully being mitigated while the other one raged throughout the entire grid because the temperatures.
Yeah, the race, though, was marred by another problem. Insane temperatures. Qatar peaked at 40 degrees in the afternoon, and even at night, 33-degree heat and 77% humidity. This was a true story. It was 77% humidity during the race, which is, I mean, when the dew point of the track is over 25 degrees, it is very uncomfortable, even if you're not in a racing car, let alone if you are in one. And it led to a lot of scary stories. We had Logan Sargeant being forced to park his car with a combination of dehydration and flu-like symptoms. Apparently, Sargeant had the flu going into this race weekend. He was trying to fight it off, and that, in combination with extreme dehydration, forced him to park the car. Alex Albon had acute heat exposure. He had to go to the medical center after the race, as did Lance Stroll. And there is some scary footage of him on the main straight on social media that looks a lot like him potentially on the brink of blacking out from the conditions. Can't say for sure. I'm not a doctor, but it didn't look right.
Did you see the onboard of Charles Leclerc from the start of the race to the end of the race?
No.
So he can't hold his head up during the last stint. His head is, hitting the headrest side to side, depending on where the G's are pulling him. He physically can't hold his head up anymore.
Yeah, so in other words, his neck had gone, in other words. George Russell openly admitted he nearly blacked out after the race was over.
He was holding his hands up out of the cockpit going down the main straight to grab some air.
Yeah, there's other little stories. Yuki Tsunoda tried to drive with his visor open, but he couldn't because it was blowing sand in his face, which wasn't ideal. Valtteri Bottas called the race torture. Charles Leclerc said it was the toughest race conditions he's ever raced in, and anyone who says it wasn't was lying, which I respected very much. Esteban Ocon was sick in his helmet on lap 15. He raced 42 laps in a Grand Prix with sick in his helmet, which is just horrible. I've put in my notes here, what did you make of the conditions and should this race have happened? To which my answer is a firm no.
This is... It's too much.
Elizabeth Blackstock for Jalop, they put out a really strong column about this and something that I deeply agree with. And this is, I'll cut to the chase here. This was a scheduling goof. You can't race this race in October. October is the back end of summer for Qatar. It's still ludicrously hot in this country, even in October, where temperatures were generally between 29 and 39 degrees Celsius, which is basically 80 to 100 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, race night, during the race, it was 33 degrees new money, which translates to 91.4 degrees in old money.
That's again...
With severe humidity.
Now, look, here's what I'll say in a grand scheme of things, and I've had accusations that the show gets too political sometimes, but I'm going to say it anyway. Get used to this. This is global warming in real time. This is climate change affecting the way we race. Because putting this... there's other examples of Qatar and sports and the sports washing that it's been taking part in for some time now. Cam, you're not the biggest soccer fan in the world, but do you remember when the last World Cup took place in Qatar?
Yeah.
During the winter.
Yeah.
When the World Cup is normally in July.
Yeah, it's the only viable time. Otherwise, it's beyond the human limit. And these are 20 of the fittest drivers on the planet.
Yeah.
These cars generate 6G through some of these corners, especially here. Very fast corners.
A lot of fast corner complexes, yeah.
Some of the heaviest cars that we've ever had. And they just had to do, as a result of the tire situation, 57 laps of just balls out at the limit of what is possible. Because that is what Formula One is. It's at the limit of what is possible according to the rules. This was over that line. We had about half of this grid openly sick, openly in physical distress by the end of the race, or passing out in the medical center after the fact. I mean, Oscar Piastri in the podium room was sprawled out on the floor, chugging an iced bottle of water, while Max is also on the floor with a towel over his head looking like he's about to pass out.
I don't think they were in a fit state to record the Max Verstappen podcast after the fact, to be honest. I think they were going to struggle a little bit on that one. Can the microphone reach the floor? Just asking for a friend. I mean, this is what it's like. Qatar's World Cup last year took place in December for a reason. Like when they had hosted the World Athletics Championships a couple of years ago, they had to run their marathon at midnight because it was too hot, 45 plus degrees, to run a marathon in midday when you would normally run a marathon. Like, if you've ever seen the John Boy's video about the 1908 Boston Olympics and the marathon that took place during that, you'll know exactly what we're talking about here. This race was too much. It was borderline dangerous. And look, to a degree,
I don't think it was borderline.
No, I mean,
I think if you're in a situation where, and I won't even expand too much on the ultra boomer takes by, well, people who should know better, Martin Brundle,
Will Buxton.
Well, unfortunately, they're both on the payroll, so they're both going to suck F1's dick regardless, because they're literally paid to suck F1's dick. But irrespective of that, the examples that they were listing, especially in the case of something like Niki Lauda's situation in 76. If you've seen Rush, you know all about it. He quit. He withdrew from the final race. It was too much. Jackie Stewart and the famous wet Nürburgring race in 1968, that was the rock upon which he built his church for his safety push later on. Senna in 1991 at Brazil, that was car inflicted with a broken gearbox. We are beyond the human limit. And it's one thing with the tires, where the tires, you can control the parameters around them. If someone passes out in an F1 car from heat exhaustion, there is no telling what happens when that car leaves the road.
Goodness only knows. I don't think we realize how lucky we were on this one. Like, we were on the brink of a potentially very, very horrible accident. And then imagine walking up to the car and finding out the driver inside said car had passed out from heat exhaustion. It's a horror. It'll be a black horror day for the sport if that was ever allowed to happen.
Alex Albon could barely lift himself out of the car.
Yeah, he had Alfa Romeo's mechanics check on him after the fact because he could barely get out of his car under his own power. When the extraction test is meant to be 10 seconds.
It was longer.
Oh,
videos out there.
Without question. Like this, look, thankfully, this was probably only going to be a one-off because next year Qatar is in December. It's literally on December 1st. This should not be a problem in 2 years' time. The cooler temperature should solve itself. This was a scheduling fuck-up from Formula One management. They should never have had this race in October. That was a horrible idea. This wasn't a problem 2 years ago, the last time we raced it, because that was a November Grand Prix. Where
it's equivalent, right, Dre, to the discussions around Japan when you're putting that race at Suzuka in October in peak typhoon season. It's the same situation. You're beyond the limit of the cars when you have a typhoon dropping rain on the track.
In the words of CM Punk, your arms are too short to box with God at that point.
Opposite end of the spectrum, but the same situation here.
Yeah,
it's too hot to be driving a Grand Prix car that hard for that long.
The cockpits are over 50 degrees. Over 50 degrees, and they're in full race suits. It's dangerous. You're cooking your drivers like brisket. Like, you could boil an egg in that cockpit at that temperature.
I'm astounded we didn't see reliability issues this weekend because the cars were under insane duress.
Yeah, and everybody made it home, technically. Well, besides the accidents, there was no mechanical failures.
Yeah, I mean, you had Red Bull and Mercedes and pretty much everyone running the cars completely open, which you don't do. For aerodynamic reasons, you don't do that unless you are under risk.
This was too much. This was dangerous. This Grand Prix should not have happened in that state or under those conditions. I get it. Sport generally has the show must go on sort of vibe, but this was too much. And what I will say in regards to Buxton and Brundle's takes are, we need generally, and give me 2 minutes on this, Cam. It's just I've got something I want to say on this. Is that
I'll turn up the heat, give you the pot, and let you cook.
Yeah, I mean, why do we need Formula One drivers to be heroes? We don't. Like this. Like, are we that insecure about our own sport that we feel like the only way people will love and respect us is if these guys are on the brink of killing themselves behind the wheel? Now, I get it. I know, and I've known and I've met people that have been very close to me in my time in radio. My old Downforce radio director, Lester Forbes, was one of these people that got a kick out of the danger of motorsport. The idea that someone might die behind the wheel for them is a thrill. And I think that's bollocks, personally. I'd rather not see people die behind the wheel of anything. Motorsport is dangerous enough as it is. I don't need any additional risk for me to watch a race with the baby oil in my hand thinking, oh God, somebody might car kick today. Isn't that wonderful? No, it's fucking horrible. And I don't like it. And it's... What I find baffling with people like, and get me wrong, people that know me know I have a level of respect for Martin Brundle. He's one of my. I wouldn't be the broadcaster I am today if it wasn't for him. But I can't stand this boomerific take that we need drivers to be heroes. The most popular thing that's happened to this sport in the last 30 years was a reality TV show that made up narratives and storylines, partly because it made the drivers more human and more relatable. It wasn't because they were heroes. It wasn't because, they were driving cars in stupid conditions. It was because they made them more relatable to us, the average Joe. It's the complete opposite of the hero worship that so many people think makes this sport what it is. I can't... This antiquated belief that, the drivers of 30, 40 years ago were these heroic dudes who raced in all conditions. As Cam quite rightly pointed out, half of these dudes were screaming about safety just as much as we are now. The difference is this audience in this generation is far more empathetic, knowledgeable, and understanding than we were 40 years ago. That's a good thing.
Yeah, well, and death in motorsport, thankfully, is not nearly as much of a regular thing. Because in this late 60s and mid 70s, if you strapped into a Formula One car, there was a fairly good chance you were not going to step back out of it.
Jackie Stewart once said that every time he left his house for a Grand Prix, he'd take extra time to look at it as he was walking towards his car because he knew there was a good chance that he wouldn't see it again. From the man himself.
My counter to that, well, not really a counter because it is, and I agree. Drivers shouldn't have to be nearly killing themselves to be your heroes. They're already strapping themselves into a 220 mile per hour carbon fiber missile and doing battle for our entertainment. That really should be enough.
And if that isn't enough, then maybe I don't want to be an F1 fan anymore. Because I don't think it's worth it at that point. If we need drivers to be on the brink of death in order for us to truly enjoy what we're watching, then what we're watching is not worth watching. It's as simple as that.
I mean, look, I wasn't on the IndyCar.
And that's the sports problem for not being able to portray their sport in as positive a light as it can. That's a failure on the sports part to promote itself properly.
Yeah, and Dre, I wasn't on the IndyCar the review episode, but a career end, a crash has probably ended my favorite IndyCar driver's career. A series of severe crashes ended my favorite NASCAR driver's career. If you don't know, big old Dale Earnhardt Jr. fan.
Of course.
We don't know what their quality of life is going to be from the brain damage done decades down the line for them. Because neither of them are particularly old.
Yeah, we've barely scratched the surface on head injuries in general. There is so much still to explore.
We're at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, CTE has only become a generalized term in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I really don't need to see my drivers, to see my athletes getting hurt, having their quality of life affected, or losing their life entirely to be entertained.
No, never. And and what that is barbaric. And it goes exactly against what I think motorsport has been doing for a very long time, which is this barbaric gladiatorial nature of leaning on that danger, leaning on that risk, leaning on that above 0% chance that someone might not come back from a Grand Prix to promote itself. And I think this sport's got a massive insecurity complex over that very reason.
Trey, a few years ago, after whose crash was it? I don't remember the specific one, so I'll go with another example. Remember when Robin Miller said, Romain Grosjean's crash wasn't as big as our crashes?
Need some proper danger in there.
When the dick measuring contest has been reduced to, your guy didn't come as close to dying as our guys because our guys actually died.
Yeah.
That's not a valid position to take.
Yeah.
Because your boys should not be dying.
No. And again, IndyCar, I've said for many years, has also had that problem. Like Joseph Newgarden over the race weekend tweeted, I'd love to see the data on how hot these cockpits really are.
That's what I was citing. I thought it was an older one.
No, it was Joseph
friend
Newgarden.
Of the show. Yeah, Joseph Newgarden, it should not be a question of, we race in hotter conditions than you and we don't suffer from it. Alex Brundle actually had the opposite take from his own father, where he said, it's a good thing it finally happened in F1. That way our organizing bodies will take this more seriously.
One of the most reasonable takes I've seen on the matter.
We've seen sports car races run in monstrous conditions. And that is in the case of the closed-top prototypes, those cars have had air conditioning. It's been mandated.
Yeah.
Since the early 2010s. You need a minimum cockpit temperature. But it's just it's a needlessly barbaric way to view your own sport, because motorsport will never be 100% safe.
Never.
But the drive for safety can never end.
It's not look, again, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I applaud the FIA for, within a day of the race ending, immediately saying, we're going to work with Formula One to be proactive to make sure this doesn't happen again. And they even acknowledged, yes, this race is going to be in December next year in its statement, but they were like, no, we're working with F1 now to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I'm glad that for once, the sport's governing body was proactive in saying, look, because they could easily have just said, sod it, it's going to be in December next year. This isn't going to happen again. No, they said, look, we're working with the sport right now to make sure this doesn't happen again. Good. Yeah, I'm delighted that it did.
Yeah, and I mean, these are open-top cars. I mean, but they are sitting on the electronics and the hydraulics of these cars. Alonso's seat was burning, and then his feet were burning.
Yeah. Now, again, I've got a personal asterisk on it. Zoe may have made a valid point in our chat saying Joseph was wanting today to think safety will improve if F1 shares it. And the FIA, I'm sure, will if they investigate this properly, because they normally do. Their investigations are normally fully released to the public. So I'm sure it will in response to that. And I hope, I'd like to think he was. I'd like to think Joseph was being sincere about that, rather than turning it into what I like to call the Danger Olympics, because I don't need that shit in motorsport at this point. It's not about which series is safer. It's about the safety of everybody. And
they should all be working with one another to make each other safer.
Yeah, and I don't see any reason why that couldn't be a thing. But yes, again, a horrible situation, but again, we're glad that everybody made it through okay, and I'm glad that the sport is going to take proactive action to make sure it doesn't happen again, because that cannot happen again. We dodged a bullet.
We dodged a series of bullets, because a minimum 8-9 drivers all having heat exhaustion and heat exhaustion related issues after
horrible.
The race.
Yeah, on a human level, we don't need that in any form of sport, especially one as dangerous enough as motorsport as it is in its usual state. Oh, did I mention there was a race, by the way? That happened. As you could probably allude.
Let me just
He's opening a championship can of Red Bull with the driver's face on it, because also our podcast isn't a visual medium unless you're paying for it. But yes,
is it a winner's bull?
It's a winner's ball because Max Verstappen became the first man in 40 years to win a world championship on a Saturday. He won it by finishing second in the sprint behind Oscar Piastri. Well done, him. And yeah, he followed it up with a Grand Slam victory on the Sunday.
His fourth in 3 years.
His fourth Grand Slam in the last 3 seasons, his 14th win of 2023, which that means he's won 29 Grand Prix in the last 2 seasons, which is just absolutely terrifying. He's
about to rack up Jenson Button's entire career within a single season.
For the second year in a row.
What the fuck?
He's won 29 out of the last 39 Grand Prix, which is, again, we have never seen anything like this. We have to talk about Max, obviously, winning the World Championship, and there's not much to say that we haven't already said on this show.
We knew this shit. We knew this shit was inevitable when that car rolled off the truck in preseason.
I mean, it's like we were trying to talk ourselves out of this scenario.
Well, I wasn't.
Well, you weren't. You to be fair to Cam, and to be fair, we kind of talked him off the fence on this one.
Just looking at this can, you just cross out that other guy.
Yeah,
I think Dr. Helmet says he's from somewhere down south.
Yeah, South America apparently. It's
still can't fucking believe that exchange happened.
Me neither. But I mean, what is to say that
it was just a complete folding over of the field. I mean, he hit him with a one-hitter quitter in qualifying, like Sebastian Vettel in 2013, where
Singapore
comes out, swings 7/10 on the field, and no one else even comes close. He blew his second lap, and it didn't even matter because no one else got within 4 with significant track evolution. Track evolution was monstrous this weekend.
Off the charts, yeah.
It didn't matter.
It didn't matter at all. It was like the greatest hits montage of Verstappen's brilliance this year, condensed into one race weekend. This was not ideal scenario for Red Bull. This race went completely against their normal strength. And Max was still utterly dominant. He absolutely destroyed this field again. And again, yes, Piastri was close, but that was because Red Bull was compromised in the way this race played out, and it was a glorified
you
sprint.
Could not have gotten a better situation for not only McLaren, but Piastri, because Piastri, we will. Feel that vid in the lungs there. Well, things that Piastri isn't so good at, and don't get me wrong, he's a rookie. He will learn.
Of course.
Because raw speed is off the charts with this kid. Not great on his tires. You could not have gotten more mitigation for Red Bull's tire wear strength and mitigation for Oscar and McLaren's tire wear weakness than what we got this weekend. So what does Max do? He extends every stint to its maximum and then just drives away at the start of each stint again because he gets good tire offset every time. Oh, and then swung a fastest lap on the field with 2 laps to the end. Yeah,
a Grand Slam win. His 14th win of the season, like we said earlier. And he's now got
a chance. His teammate.
He lapped Sergio Perez. And he now has a championship lead of over 200 points with 5 rounds to go.
He could take the rest of the year off. It wouldn't make a lick of difference.
Yeah, he would, on his own, he would be leading the constructors by over 100 points. This is otherworldly. I cannot stress this enough. We have never seen anything like this in the 74 years of we now know as F1 as we know it. This, for me, is the greatest 3-year run in the history of F1. Like this is terrifying.
I mean, you can name situations in the past. I would say since Red Bull and Honda got their act together in 21. 21 was messy for obvious reasons on really both sides of the equation. But since that year, you can name situations where Max didn't maximize, pun intended, everything on the table. One hand and you'd had fingers left over.
Right.
Every weekend, he just gets the maximum that is available. Got a bad start on the medium tires in the sprint, carved back through the field, was catching Piastri and just didn't have enough time. Singapore, car was a dud that weekend, still finished 5th.
Yeah, should have been 4th. It was very unlucky it wasn't 4th because Leclerc was limping at the end of that race.
And that was with Red Bull being badly compromised on strategy. There was still an alternate scenario where Red Bull had a win condition in Singapore.
They did.
If everything went right. Everything else this year is a win or a second place. And the 2 second places, one was mechanical induced and one was strategy induced.
Yeah. It's as near to...
Everything else on the table is a number 1.
It's as near to a perfect season as we've ever seen in F1. This is outrageous on every level. This is outrageous. I don't care what sort of fucking Hamilton nut hugger you are that still wants to beat the drum about Abu Dhabi 2021 on Twitter. This is the greatest 3-year run we have ever seen in this sport. He beat a prime Hamilton like in 2021. And even if you want to ignore how Abu Dhabi finished, he went into that final round ahead in the championship on countback with 17 top 2 finishes out of 21 races.
Well, and got fucked on 3 scenarios on Singapore. We didn't run Singapore in 21. That's autopilot.
No.
Reset.
No. Monza
he got fucked on Baku.
Yeah, Baku was not him.
He got fucked on Silverstone 21, and we'll unpack some more on that kind of move in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And he got fucked on Valtteri Bottas going bowling in Hungary.
Right. Like, Monza's the only one that's even questionable, and even then I put that in the book as a racing incident.
That was the exact definition of a 50-50.
Yeah, the other 3, like, he was going to win that race in Baku. It was going to be a Red Bull 1-2, most likely. Almost certainly was going to be... I mean, there was an argument to call that race right there and then, given how close the red flag was to the end. You could have called it, and I would have understood the decision if Michael Massey decided to do that. Instead, he wanted to have a 2-lap sprint finish to the race because entertainment.
Well, we thought it was going to be 25 points swinging back the other way. It ended up being nothing.
We'll look out for the magic button.
Yeah. And then Silverstone, Lewis drifted out wide, carried too much speed into a corner, and turbo murdered him.
Yeah.
And it happens.
Yeah.
I don't even hate Lewis for it. It's just made a mistake. It happened.
Yeah.
We'll talk about another one in a little bit. And we're going to get roasted to high heaven for it.
I don't care.
And then Hungary got impaled by 2 other cars hitting his side pod and still finished 9th with 75% of an RB16B.
Right. And that was arguably the weakest of his 3 seasons, because that was also, according to the eyes of many, the cost cap breaking car.
Let me tell you something. If Red Bull got this much performance across 3 seasons out of tax corrected about 480,000 US dollars?
It was less than $500,000. Definitely. It was about 400K.
Then they are the greatest technical team in the history of motorsport.
Ever.
More COVID. I mean, that's less than the cost of a Formula One gearbox.
Right. And 2022, he swatted the Ferrari title challenge away.
He broke Ferrari so completely that Ferrari has not recovered in any way, shape, or form.
They've won 1 race since Austria, since Silverstone 2022. 1.
He helped get most of that regime fired.
Yeah. The Binotto era is largely dead at Ferrari purely through Red Bull swatting them aside in the back half of that year. Binotto said that Ferrari could win all of the last 10 races. They won 0.
They've won 1 race since that. That was a season and a half ago.
Right. And 2023, arguably the
complete unmitigated domination.
Arguably the greatest single season we've ever seen in Formula One.
Yeah.
He's won 14 out of 17 this year.
Yeah, the merger of the combination of Max and the RB19 has been about as perfect as you can get. He has maximized everything this car has to give, and this car has a lot to give.
Yeah,
because even now, even having lost 1.25 races, because they don't count sprints for the record books as Grand Prix wins, they're still odds on favor to have the single greatest Formula One car of all time.
Yeah, on single season dominance and performance, they are well on pace. It's ridiculous. I mean, and to that effect, shout out to Oscar Piastri. I mean, Oscar was... Oscar, this was by a country mile his best weekend in F1. This was the first weekend he was genuinely better than Norris. And there's no argument. He had a couple of favourable circumstances. I mean, the sprint... his competition, a lot of them were on the soft tyre, which we didn't know was going to be completely unusable in said sprint. But his pace was excellent. But he was able to hold Verstappen off once the latter was in open air towards the back end of that sprint. And then in the race itself, yes, again, he got lucky starting from P6 that we had a disastrous turn one for 3 or 4 cars, and he was immediately second on the road. But again, his pace was good enough to hold Norris behind him at the end of the race. Piastri brings home 25 points on the weekend, a sprint win and a career-high finish in second. Look, I'm going to be real with you here. I still think people need to pump the brakes on him just a little bit. I said on Twitter yesterday that, look, he's getting a 12 right now. I need him at a 9. But this kid is the real deal. Good. Like, the kid is absolutely the real deal. Holy shit.
Yeah. I mean, look, like, irrespective of the issues, I mean, he's in his first season, and he just was able to hold off, because Max, he just didn't have enough time with the pace he had. No one else has been able to hold off Max Verstappen for a result this year, Singapore aside.
And no one's been able to match Lando Norris in a McLaren since Carlos Sainz did 3 years ago.
Yeah, well, there was the whole Daniel Ricciardo thing. But yeah. At the end of the day, Norris ruined his own weekend because he couldn't stop going over track limits. He screwed up pretty much every qualifying lap he had this weekend.
I said it on the WTF1 wrap, and I'll say it again here. Lando Norris should have won this race. I think his pace was exceptional. He ruined it for himself by starting 10th.
I think he would have been a closer second, because I do tend to get the impression that Max was on a compromised but safer strategy by going to the limit of the tires each run, getting himself undercut, but having more margin on the tires to start with. Ultimately, you can only play what's in front of you. And Lando screwed himself in Q3. Screwed up both of his laps. He ended up starting P10.
His pace was exceptional. He was really, really fast. I think he was as fast as Max on paper. Again, maybe Max was compromised. We don't know exactly how much of a factor that was. But I think this could have been Norris's best chance to win a race this weekend. But he blew it for himself. Look, I still think Piastri is a little raw. That tyre management, I think, is the big one. Is the big problem with him. But he's almost like an exact replica of his F1 Manager 22 build. If you've ever played that game, the pace he has is the raw speed.
He has raw pace in spades, Dre.
Yeah, it is. He is every bit, maybe 1% slower than Lando Norris, who is, in many people's opinion, is a top 5 driver on this grid.
This season, this season, I could genuinely argue he's probably been top 3.
Yeah, Norris has been incredible. Like,
if I were to pick my top 3 this year,
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. It would probably be Max, then Lewis, then Lando.
Yeah, I think it's between Norris and Alonso for that free spot. I think it's very close between them. I think you could make an argument either way. I think Alonso's been very unlucky due to the development of the car around the mid he's in, but Norris has been exceptional post-upgrade. He's
given Lando Norris fits.
Yeah, Norris admitted it himself. He's admitted that Piastri is giving him trouble. And that is something that is great news for McLaren. Zach Brown has been vindicated for all the driver management bullshit he's done in the last 3 years because he was able to poach a gem in Oscar Piastri. Could
you imagine how little they'd be able to show at Alpine if you still had the lineup of Fernando Alonso and Oscar Piastri in that shitbox of a car?
And look, I'll say this much about Alpine. The driver lineup is not the problem in that team. Esteban Ocon is a damn good racing driver, and Pierre Gasly.
There's more energy in this championship can of Red Bull than there is in the power unit of the Alpine 2023 F1 car.
Right,
that engine is a boat anchor.
Right. You look at that. You look at Alpine. The drivers are very good. Like Ocon is
both of them this weekend. Ocon threw up in his helmet, and he was terrific.
7th in the 6th best car in the field. Gasly would have been in the points too if it wasn't for 15 seconds of time penalties that he picked up. It's stupid, but it's unfortunate. But my point is, of Alpine, the driver quality is not the problem. The problem is their car is just slow, and
they've got a half decent chassis being pulled around by a drunk French hamster.
Right, and and we got to talk about as well turn 1 and.
Yikes! Everyone, put your flame suits on.
Yeah, because I'm gonna say something that might be deemed slightly controversial here. That was 100% on Hamilton, and he should know better for a driver of his experience.
And he admitted as much.
Yeah, and look, fair play to Lewis. He owned it. You saw the replay and was immediately like, "Nope, that's on me." And I'm not going to get into too much detail about it. Max committed to the inside. George understandably went for the outside to try and get around him. Hamilton took a risk too many. He was on the soft tyre to start off with. He obviously felt like he could try and gamble on the outside, but he took too narrow a line. He took too narrow a line, and he's hit George Russell, and he's taken himself out of the race. It was 100% on him. And I find it disturbing on social media that Hamilton did the right thing, completely owned his mistake, and he's got his own fans on social media telling him that he's being too diplomatic. What the fuck? Are you kidding me?
Well, I mean, like when you got instances where I'm not even going to say I'm just going to refer to him as the most divorced man on planet Earth. Posting entire essays. If you're familiar with F1 Twitter, you probably know who this is. They have a black and white profile picture. That's all I'm going to leave it at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But and the comparisons to Silverstone 21, like I mentioned earlier, the difference is that the car on the outside turning in didn't have a car on the inside understeering into it.
Not to
Max
mention,
and George took their lines, held their lines, and were more than entitled to keep to their lines.
Right.
Lewis is the one who crossed over into them, and he did it to himself. And when the commentators agree, the stewards, though they ruled it a lap 1, turn 1 incident, which it was.
Yeah, it was.
Ruled car 44 predominantly at fault. And when Lewis Hamilton is saying that Lewis Hamilton is at fault, it's okay. He fucked up. He has 7. I'm sure he'll cry about it over the 7 World Drivers' Championships he has. It happened.
Look, I love Hamilton as much as the next guy, but his fans on social media do not need to give him a benefit of the doubt he doesn't deserve.
He'll tell you he didn't deserve it.
Yeah, he made a mistake. I saw people that I genuinely like who are Hamilton fans that were like, I need him to be in his villain era. I'm like, no, he fucked up. No, it happens.
He doesn't need to be in his villain era because Mercedes are trying to get their shit back together to get back to the level that we know they can be at, i.e. the dick flattening supreme of the F1 World Championship. And they don't need their drivers hitting each other. And I'm sorry for whatever plan that was thought up before the race, because supposedly there was a plan in place at Mercedes where the soft tire running Lewis would try to jump everyone into turn 1. Ultimately, he still turned across 2 other cars.
Yeah, I just...
that were completely on their own line, holding their own lines. Ultimately, in racing, if you are side by side with someone and you fail to hold your line and you hit them, you're going to be deemed responsible.
Yeah, if you're going to go into a free wide, you better be ultra careful about what you're doing. And
if you're the last one in, you have to be the first one out.
Yeah, James Hinchcliffe famously said that, and I think he's absolutely spot on. And yeah, Hamilton's to blame. He's 100% to blame for that one. And honestly, I try to like Mercedes and how they get down generally as a team, but this was a damage limitation sort of weekend. for Mercedes, and the cynically minded of me thinks they were trying to play damage control a lot this weekend, because those who missed it back on Thursday, like Lewis Hamilton was asked about the possibility of an 11th team in Formula One, and Andretti was specifically referenced in the question because their bid was approved by the FIA last week. So of course people are going to get asked their opinions on it, and Hamilton was all for it, saying that, yeah, I'd happily love an 11th team, 2 more seats on the grid, more opportunity for a diverse entry, brilliant, fantastic, all for it. Then he goes and finds a fan account on Twitter the next day and says, I back an 11th team, but not Andretti.
Andretti was specifically mentioned in that press conference.
Call it what it was, he backtracked.
And again, if he wants to backtrack, at least own the backtracking. It's fine. Yeah. I'm not going to hate you for it.
We're not stupid. We know that his team boss doesn't want Andretti on the grid.
You have the transcripts. You're a literal motorsport journalist, Ray.
This is how toxic discourse is on this platform, where we can do our jobs properly as journalists and report the backtracking that your driver and your team he's driving for has done, and we're the ones at fault. It's fucking nonsense.
How dare you read the transcripts correctly? To bring us back on track a little bit here, that Mercedes dodged a bullet with this one because Ferrari was going to take a boatload of points off of them, except for the fact that Carlos Sainz couldn't start due to a fuel leak.
Oh,
a DNS.
And Charles Leclerc's very quietly put down some good work in the last few rounds. He's had fourth, and fifth the last 4 weekends.
Other than Singapore, he's gotten everything that car has to give, because the Ferrari's just not a very good car. But it meant that despite the fuckery at turn 1, Mercedes actually extended their gap in the second in the constructors. Hamilton lost 1 round to try and catch up Sergio Perez for second in the championship, because Sergio Perez is the struggle bus.
Cheeks.
He was cheeks this weekend. He's been cheeks for multiple weekends.
Yeah, it's like started in the midfield, couldn't get his hard tyres going. Limits. And then picked up 15 seconds worth of track limits penalties. And it got so bad that
it was in qualifying what ruined his weekend. He got track limits on pretty much every qualifying lap that mattered.
Yeah, and in the race itself, it got so bad, as engineer said, Sergio, this is hurting our race. Like, even his engineer is starting to get fed up with him at this point. Like, it's not good, man, honestly. Like, we could get into Perez for another half an hour if we really wanted to, but he is not good enough right now, and he is only putting himself in deeper and deeper trouble by being the way that he is right now. And it's just not good enough.
McLaren has outscored Red Bull over the last 5 races as a result, because they've got 2 drivers who are racking up podiums with abandon. And the endless well of Max Verstappen's might can only tide that back for so long. If next year, if McLaren even maintains this, because they are clearly the second best team in the field, they are blowing Mercedes and Ferrari and Aston out of the water right now. This has been some of the best in-season development I've seen in my time watching Formula One.
It's incredible.
The last time I saw a car take this kind of jump was probably the 2009 McLaren.
Yeah,
they changed that car around.
It's a remarkable turnaround. The first 8 rounds of this season, they'd scored 17 points. They've scored 202 since then.
They had the worst car in Formula One for the first 3 races. It was horrible.
Yeah. And then now, if this continues through next year, Red Bull are going to have a genuine problem, because, like, you want to know a fun fact? Last 3 race weekends, McLaren has outscored Red Bull by 29.
Yeah. Max can win every race there is to win, and believe me, he's trying. But if McLaren can maintain this into next year, Max will run the field over for the Drivers' Championship, but Red Bull will have to look over their shoulders in the Constructors, because, I mean, and this is the first time Horner has really addressed it in a post-race press conference, but they don't have 2 drivers right now.
No, they have 1.5, if that.
The 1.5 is actually Max Verstappen. There is no second driver.
Yeah, and Checo was so much better than this last year. Like, it's genuinely frustrating. Yes, okay,
he's broken.
He's won the same. he's won the same number of Grand Prix, but Checo was a 300-point scorer last year easily and should have been second in a championship. But
Dre, think back to last year when Max won his driver's championship on that very rainy, very regulatory, fucked up day in Japan. He was throwing hands with Charles Leclerc all race.
Yeah.
Charles Leclerc, who is one of the best wheel-to-wheel racers in Formula One, and bad fast.
Yeah, but he was still 27 seconds down the road.
He's getting lapped, Dre.
Yeah, lapped.
He got lapped.
Lapped on pace alone. Embarrassing.
And it didn't even matter for the championship because he qualified so badly for the sprint that he was in prime stinger range for Ocon to impale him.
Yeah.
And knock him out of the sprint.
And yeah, Perez was unlucky on that one. I mean, you can never, no
one ever expects the Alpine Inquisition into your side pod.
The free wide, of course.
Why are you down there in a Red Bull RB19 fighting with the Haas's and the Alpines?
It's just not good enough. You're in the best car. You're in the best car in the sport's history. How are you this bad?
And the worst thing is, he only had the second biggest deficit between drivers.
Hello, Lance Stroll.
Lance Stroll, who had, without doubt, his worst weekend in Formula One. He was quite literally a second a lap off of Alonso's pace in the race. And he also fought with his engineers. Physically.
Threw his wheel out of the car after getting eliminated in Q1 on Friday, and then shoved his trainer afterwards. Which is just all sorts of fucky.
Lawrence, your
levels.
son is writing checks that his ass cannot cash. And sooner or later, the other shareholders at Aston Martin, they're going to come. They're going to come for your head.
I don't think he's made a Q2 since before the break.
And the Aston isn't as good as it was when it started the season. Alonso was running 4th to 5th for most of this race before he went off.
Yeah, and God bless him, Alonso is trying. Like, he's if anything, he's overdriving to try and compensate for its deficiencies right now.
Yeah, I mean, Dre, we talked about this in a Discord chat a couple of weeks ago, but you could name, similar to Max with the maximization of the car, you can name opportunities that Alonso has left on the table. You can count them on one hand, and you would have fingers left over this year. Alonso is getting everything this car has to give pretty much every weekend. Yeah. Stroll is a second a lap off his pace.
It's horrible.
People have been fired for less.
People have been fired for a lot less than that. Before we get out of here as well, I want to talk about Andretti. Well, we're already at an hour 10. Fuck it. Might as well put the whole lot in there as well because we're here already. I mean, we got the word last week that Andretti's formal bid to join the F1 grid as early as 2025 was accepted by the FIA. And yeah, the problem is we all know what the parameters are here. That they also need Formula One's commercial rights holders, the FOM, to also greenlight the bid. And we all suspected this was where the true battleground was going to be drawn here. And yeah, I mean, what have you made of it all, Cam, so far? And I'd like your overall opinion on it, because I think this is going to be political warfare going forward now.
Yeah, and it already is. I mean, the war of words has been constant, and very funny for George Russell to be the first one to fire the shot of, we're Formula One, we want quality, not quantity. 2 races after crashing himself into a wall and out of a podium position.
My man, you used to drive for Williams when they were flat broke.
Nah, he drove the 2019 Williams where the brakes didn't fit on the car when they first built it.
Yeah, and they had an illegal suspension fork in their car. A car that was so bad it pretty much killed Paddy Lowe's legacy in F1 overnight.
A car that was that bad and illegal. If you're going to be illegal, at least be good. If you're going to cheat right.
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
I mean, Christian Horner is saying that they're going to build their own power unit first, despite the fact he's running Honda's intellectual property in his car already.
No, it's not even Honda's intellectual property. It's a Honda power unit. The stickers are there, and they're not going to be running their own IP as far as power unit until 26, and then it's going to have Ford stickers on it. So I don't know.
It's
just a lot. It's a lot of Formula One head honchos and drivers, and me coughing violently from the lingering effects of COVID, of people talking out of both sides of their mouth.
Right.
Because you can't value your own team. I mean, Alpine just valued themselves at $800 million. You can't value your own teams at this level and then have James Vowles coming out saying, oh, we're flat broke. We can't afford to have more dilution, when Andretti has openly stated they're willing to pay whatever anti-dilution fee is on the table. Currently, it's $200 million US.
It's likely going to be more than that.
But right now, the important thing is they are approved. FOM cannot legally stop them from paying that entry fee and competing.
Right.
The question is the commercial rights. And the question for that is, and commercial rights are beyond just TV, but obviously the TV money, showing the cars on. Imagine if we had like a 12-car pileup and we can't show it on the cameras because the Andrettis were involved. That would be funny.
Yeah,
but
Mohammed Ben Sulayem literally said it wouldn't be impossible if Andretti got in without a commercial rights agreement, where you just straight up couldn't show him on TV, which would be very problematic in many ways.
What, you're going to not show the race starts anymore?
I mean,
but it is like to the letter of the rules. That can they can't stop Andretti from entering. They can stop him another way, though. The biggest one is that commercial rights also includes commercial freight, the flying of all the teams, cars, and drivers to each event. That's organized by Formula One management. That, among other things, it's just going to be one long, massive clusterfuck where the game, and we talked about this at length the other day in a Discord as well, with a few friends of the show. The game, as far as I can see it, is drag this out, stop Andretti via any means necessary, even if it means you go to a court and you end up being ruled a trust and find out the ass.
Right.
It doesn't matter, because if you can get that anti-dilution fee high enough, then you can force Andretti's hand and ensure that the only viable way for them to get in is to buy an existing member of the club.
And no one's going to sell because they know how much their place is now worth. Like, Alpine, if anything, gave the game away by selling a quarter of their team off earlier this year. They set their own price at $800 million, roughly. And look, I don't like...
They're a factory, but they stink.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't like any of this. I don't like the fact that Mohammed Ben Sulayem is essentially using Andretti as a political pawn to go fuck you at the FOM. This is blatantly what his game plan was all along. Improve an Andretti bid, wash his hands and say, hey, look, the FIA approved this bid. It's your problem now. Because I wanted more teams in F1 the whole time. I wanted more engine manufacturers. I wanted 12 teams on the grid. This is my way of saying, fuck you. You go figure it out.
And this is General Motors. And we know they have announced their intent that they do plan to build their own power unit.
Right.
The other aspect of this that people might not know about is that GM, in all of their cars that they sell, especially in the United States, are one of the biggest purveyors of Sirius XM satellite radio.
Mm-hmm.
Who owns Sirius XM satellite radio, Dre?
I believe it's Liberty Media.
One of their biggest cash cows. There is a lot more at play than just Formula One if Andretti and GM really want to put guns to heads.
They could make this very ugly if they want to. Like, it depends how badly does Andretti want to make this happen? How badly do they want to get ugly regarding this fight? Because they can make it very ugly if they want to. They can use all sorts of weapons and bargaining tools at their disposal. Like, it's obvious. It's more than obvious. The teams do not want the 11th team. It's competition. It's greed. Call it what it is. They can't directly say it's that because they look like idiots in terms of PR, but we all know that's the reason why they're going to reject this bid.
Oh, it's the fact that Andretti can take them to EU antitrust court and they would destroy FOM for it.
Yeah, and the FIA will wash its hands of it and say, well, we approved them, so not our problem.
The FIA will stand in Andretti's corner.
Yeah. Like I said, Mohammed Ben Sulayem is using them as a pawn because he doesn't like the management side of the sport. he understandably called out a potential Saudi Arabian $20 billion bid to buy the sport out back in January. Quite rightly said, hang on a minute, these new owners might be bad for the sport. It's more than just the cash. And the teams told him to shut the fuck up. And then Ben Sulayem was like, fine, I'm not going to have any say in the day-to-day running of F1 anymore. These two parties do not like each other. And Andretti is the latest ball in the middle of a very nasty political court between the governing body, which Mohammed Ben Sulayem has literally called himself the landlord of Formula One, versus the sports commercial wing, who clearly wants that US franchise model of the 10 teams making more money together in a unified group and not worrying about an 11th team coming in and diluting their pot. Even though it's more than obvious that you don't want to make your pot any bigger, because there is no better bid available than an American team, a market that you're desperate to push. You know, we've seen you go from 1 US Grand Prix to 3 overnight. You're throwing bucket loads of money at Miami and Vegas to try and get those races, to try and take that American market that you're desperate to have, but you want to spit in the face of an American team with an American power unit manufacturer trying to get on the grid. Are you fucking kidding me, FOM? You
are not going to get, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter how much value, because they will say it's about the value. They'll say it's about how much Andretti and GM bring to the sport. Ultimately, it doesn't actually matter, because it's better for the teams to just say, oh, I don't see it. They don't bring anything. Even if they objectively do, they're always going to say that they don't, because it's better for them.
What the fuck is Haas bringing to the table? What the fuck is a rebranded Alpha? Like, what the hell is a rebranded for the second time in 5 years Alpha Tauri bringing to the sport? Before they were bought out by Audi, what was Sauber bringing to the table? Please tell me.
And there are rumblings around Sauber and Audi right now
that aren't good.
And let me tell you, if these new power unit regulations come around, and Volkswagen doesn't even bother after dropping the money, you've gained one engine manufacturer, and it's effectively Red Bull with a skeleton crew of former Mercedes and Honda entities or personnel. And then you have an entity in Ford who literally are just slapping a sticker on it, because Ford is not actually entering.
No.
They're supplying stickers,
it's a brand deal.
Stickers, goodwill, and a thumbs up.
It's a brand deal. Call it what it is. Yeah,
you gain one engine manufacturer who's not actually an engine manufacturer, and oh, by the way, they're only going to supply the two Red Bull teams. So you just burn down your previous set of regulations for no gain, potentially?
Yeah, I just think all of this is a spit in the face to America more than anything else. This is a market you've tried desperately hard to crack over the last 5 years, and yet you got the dream scenario, an American team with actual clout, the biggest racing name in the United States in Andretti, with General Motors backing up the bid, that are prepared to pay any anti-dilution fee on the table and build their own power unit. And that's not good enough? Fuck off! You might as well just say Formula One is a closed shop.
And ultimately, I think that's saying the quiet part out loud, is that they want F1 to be a closed shop. The problem is that every time you get a closed shop in motorsport where everyone seals themselves together, one entity leaving topples that whole Jenga.
Half these teams didn't make it out of almost didn't make it out of the pandemic.
Williams died. Williams died and had to be bought. McLaren had to mortgage the MTC.
They sold, what was it, 25% of the team?
Yeah.
Up to 33.
I mean, the McLaren car brand is not doing good either.
No. They let go of over 1,000 people during the pandemic. Let's not forget there was a massive amount of layoffs in that factory.
Yeah. So you can't be talking out of both sides of your mouth and saying, oh, well, we make so much money this way, we can't dilute it. And then at the same time, or we don't want to dilute it, and then say, oh, well, we don't have any money, we can't do it. Well, pick a hill to die on.
Like, if you want to say
it's telling us that we're too stupid to understand what they're saying.
Look, I have a lot of time and appreciation for James Vowles. He's one of the good ones in F1 as a team boss, and I genuinely like and he's done fantastic work at Williams this year. I say this wholeheartedly. I have friends in that Williams team. They talk glowingly about how great a leader James Vowles has been since taking that job on. Mm-hmm. I have eyewitness accounts on this. They love Vowles. He was talking out of both sides of his mouth when he was talking about it on Sky. You can't be sitting there telling me you're throwing hundreds of millions of pounds in this sport to try and get them up the grid, while also saying we're too financially unstable to have an 11th team.
You can't say your team is worth that much while also saying your team isn't worth enough to survive.
It's bollocks. It's total bollocks. You like, in other words, like we are like. How can you sit there and say we're going to throw tens of millions of pounds into F1, but also say you're openly admitting we're too financially unstable to do it, yet you'll also say, nah, can't have this, guys, as we shove this money into an open pit. Nah, can't take an 11th team.
Because the play is, and JB, friend of the show, is in the chat and has said it, the play is to push things out until you can make the anti-dilution fee fundamentally unpayable.
Yeah, stall as long as you can.
Stall as long as you can. Make it so much that no one in their right mind would actually pay it. And then by right of already being in the club, your team's automatically worth a minimum of that anti-dilution fee.
Yeah, 100%.
Because then you can just sell up and then your shareholders laugh all the way home.
The lowest number I've heard regarding that new fee is 700 million. And that was from Zach Brown at McLaren. That's the lowest number I've heard on the record. Off the record, I've heard numbers with a B mentioned.
Yeah.
It's
and we
terrifying.
know based on current actual valuation, not the potential, F1 is not worth that much money to have the foot in the door at $1 billion. Because unlike a traditional franchise model, you don't get anything when you go into Formula One. You get the right to show up and get your ass beat by Red Bull and Max Verstappen.
Right.
That's about it. You don't get a stadium. You don't get TV rights beyond what FOM will negotiate for you. Mm-hmm. You don't get local rights for, say, a stadium like a home game.
Right.
You just get the right to show up.
Yeah.
And you cannot run your system like a franchise model and then not be a franchise in the way you support your own entities.
That's the point. The NFL negotiates everything as a sports league and then divvies up that money 32 ways amongst the other franchises, which 31 of them are privately owned. The only one that isn't is the Green Bay Packers. Famously, they're fan owned. You know, so it's
and a ton of that money is local TV rights.
Yeah, it's
for any franchise, especially on the college side of things, because NFL is really more, you know, big network TV most of the time.
Of course. Yeah, it's bollocks, man. It's such a I mean, this was all expected. I knew it was going to go down this way. It was more than obvious the teams would kick up a stink. At best, they'd be apathetic towards it. Zach Brown's the only one that's even hinted at being okay with it as long as the fee was stupid high. Like I said, he said, I'm okay with it if it's 700 mil, is what he basically said. So a 3.5 times increase. It's absolutely mental that they're using the mortgaged potential value of the sport to play Andretti for suckers. And I think it's stupid. But, you know, there you go.
And if they're not going to get in with full manufacturer support, with full sponsorship from an entity like Gainbridge, nobody's going to get in.
No, you might as well call it a closed shop, which it basically is right now. If this bid gets, and I think it will. I think they'll find some bullshit reason to reject this bid, or kick the can down the road.
Well, the bid is approved. It's a question of whether Andretti are going to be competing basically entirely out of their own pocket, and if they're willing to do that, and ship all their own shit everywhere, and not be shown on TV,
which would be. That just isn't worth it for me at that point.
That'd be self-destructive.
Yeah,
that would be risking Andretti Global, as we now call it.
Yeah.
The health of that organization, and that's that's going to be the play. Is fine if you want to compete in F1, we're going to make you kill your own team.
Good luck. But Formula One will be back in a week and a half's time. at the Circuit of the Americas. It's the United States Grand Prix next weekend. Again, RJ will be at that one too, the lucky bastard. That'll be that one in Austin. Again, we're all playing for second. It's like Larry Bird has rolled up in his warm-up jacket saying, which one of you guys is coming for second? And we'll see how that plays out. Again, like I said, United States Grand Prix, week and a half's time in Austin. One of my favorite rounds, actually. I'm looking forward to it, but hopefully we'll get a decent race out of it. Next podcast will be a little bit of a catch-up for us on MotoGP. Marc Marquez officially leaving Repsol Honda, and a little bit on the Japanese Grand Prix that wasn't next time around as well. So look forward to that. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. He's been Cam Buckley. Until next time, thank you very much for listening. Sayonara.
God, he's going to pass Seb's win total by the end of the year. Kill me.
Fuck!